She thought love would take her from dusty village roads to a life of shining city lights. When a charming city boy promised her freedom, respect, and a future bigger than her dreams, she chose him over her parents, her home, and everything she had ever known. But the city wasn't a garden of dreams. It was a test of survival. Betrayed, alone, and far from home, she had two choices: break, or become stronger than the girl who once believed in sweet promises. This is the story of how love deceived her, but courage rebuilt her. I used to believe love could change the size of your world. I grew up in a small town called Maple Creek, the kind of place with one blinking traffic light, one diner that closed at 8, and fields that stretched so wide you could watch the sun sink for miles. Everyone knew everyone. People waved when they drove past, even if they didn't particularly like you. It was safe, predictable, small. Sometimes I felt small too. My dad owned a modest farm just outside town. My mom worked part-time in the elementary school library. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Enough food, enough stability, enough love. But enough isn't always the same thing as everything. By the time I turned 18, I felt like my life had already been mapped out for me. Community college nearby, maybe marry someone local, maybe work at the clinic or the school. There's nothing wrong with that life. I know that now, but back then it felt like standing still. Then Daniel Hayes showed up. He drove into town in a black SUV that looked like it belonged in a movie, not parked outside Miller's Diner. He was visiting his aunt and uncle for the summer. He said he lived in Chicago. He said it casually, like it was no big deal. But to me, Chicago sounded like another universe. I first talked to him at the 4th of July fair. I was helping my mom at a lemonade stand when he walked up, smiling like he already knew me. "You look like you don't belong behind a folding table," he said. I laughed nervously. Where do I belong? Somewhere bigger than this. No one had ever said that to me before. Over the next few weeks, he kept showing up. At the diner, at the hardware store, once even near our property, claiming he was just driving around. He asked me questions no one else asked. What I wanted, not what was expected. What I dreamed about, whether I ever felt stuck. I told him I wanted to study nursing, that I wanted to help people, that sometimes I felt like my life would never stretch beyond Maple Creek. "You're not small town," he told me one night while we sat on the hood of his SUV watching fireflies blink over the fields. "You're just underplaced." Underplaced. That word wrapped around my heart. He talked about rooftop views and late-night coffee shops and business meetings and ambition. He said the city was alive, that it tested you, sharpened you, expanded you. When he looked at me, I felt chosen. My parents didn't see what I saw. My dad didn't like how smooth Daniel sounded. "He talks big," Dad said one night. "But what does he actually do?" "He's building a startup," I said defensively. "With what money? It takes time." Dad just shook his head. Character shows inconsistency. My mom was gentler, but just as worried. "You've only known him a few weeks." But when you're 18, a few weeks can feel like forever. Daniel told me he loved me before summer ended. He said I was different from girls in the city. Said I grounded him. Said I made him want something real. When he asked me to come back to Chicago with him, my heart pounded so hard I could barely think. "You could enroll in school there," he said. "You could become anything. Don't let fear keep you small." When he asked my parents for their blessing, they refused. "He doesn't have stability," Dad said firmly. "He has words." I felt torn in half. Loyalty on one side, love on the other. Daniel said if I stayed, distance would change everything. "We'll drift," he warned. "People always do." I was terrified of losing him. So 2 days before he left, I packed a suitcase. I left a letter on my bed telling my parents I loved them and that I would make them proud. My hands shook the entire time I wrote it. The drive to Chicago felt like crossing a border into a different life. I cried quietly, staring out the window as cornfields turned into highways and highways turned into skyscrapers. The city swallowed me whole. Noise everywhere. People everywhere. Buildings so tall they blocked out the sky I'd grown up under. Our apartment wasn't the sparkling high-rise I had imagined. It was small, older building, narrow hallways, a view of brick walls and tangled wires. It's temporary, Daniel said. Once funding comes through, we'll upgrade. I believed him. We got married at a courthouse a week later. No white dress.
Noisily.
Just signatures and a blurry photo taken by a clerk who didn't even look up. I told myself love didn't need an audience. At first, everything felt like an adventure. Grocery stores bigger than my entire high school. Subways that roared underground. Late night lights that never turned off. But slowly, things began to shift. Daniel's meetings happened mostly at bars. His investors were always almost ready to sign. Money was always about to come in. When I asked about starting college, he said, "Let's stabilize first." So I got a job waitressing downtown. The city was not romantic when you were exhausted. Customers snapped their fingers for refills. Tips were unpredictable. My feet ached every night. Daniel started coming home later. Sometimes he smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked about it, he rolled his eyes. That's how networking works. You wouldn't understand. Those words made me feel ignorant. Small again. One afternoon, I saw a message flash across his phone while he was in the shower. A woman's name. A red heart emoji. My stomach dropped. When I confronted him, he laughed. "You're acting paranoid." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the truth came crashing in on a rainy Tuesday. A woman knocked on our apartment door. She was confident, beautiful, furious. "Is Daniel here?" she asked. "He's not home." "And you are?" "I'm his wife." Her expression shifted from anger to something colder. "He's been engaged to my sister for 6 months." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. When Daniel got home and saw both of us standing there, I saw fear in his eyes for the first time. Excuses poured out of him. "It's complicated. It wasn't serious." "You're overreacting. But marriage isn't complicated. It's either real or it's a lie." After she left, slamming the door behind her, I stood in the middle of that tiny apartment, the place I had chosen over my childhood home, and felt something inside me snap. "I left everything for you," I whispered. "That was your decision," he said flatly. "Not ours."
Meaning?
That was the moment I realized I hadn't married a future. I had married potential, and potential is just a promise without proof. And promises don't pay rent. That night, I didn't cry the way I expected to. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my hands, and understood something terrifying and freeing at the same time. I had made the biggest mistake of my life, but I was still alive, and that meant I could still change the ending. The night everything unraveled, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry the way movies teach you heartbreak is supposed to look. I just felt cold. Cold in my chest. Cold in my hands. Cold in the way I looked at Daniel and realized I didn't actually know the man I had married. The next morning, I still went to work. That was the strange part about betrayal. The world doesn't pause for it. The train still ran. Customers still wanted coffee. My manager still complained about being understaffed. But inside, something had cracked open. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had. Every promise. Every late night talk about our future. I remembered the way he used to say, "Trust me." Now I wondered how many other women he had said that to. When I got home that evening, Daniel was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up. "About what?" "About your fiancée." "She's not my fiancée." "She thinks she is." He sighed dramatically, like I was the inconvenience. It was business. Her family has connections. I had to keep things smooth. "You were going to marry her." "I married you, didn't I?" The way he said it, like I should feel honored, made my stomach twist. "You lied to me." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple." That was the first time I saw the shift in him clearly. The charming tone he used in Maple Creek was gone. In its place was irritation, impatience, superiority. "You're acting emotional," he said. "This is how the real world works." The real world. I had left everything for the real world. And now I felt more alone than I ever had back home. A week later, the electricity bill went unpaid. I didn't know until the lights flickered off while I was cooking pasta. I stood in the dark kitchen, heart pounding. "Daniel?" I called. He didn't answer. I found him outside on the phone, pacing. "They'll give me another week," he said into the receiver. "Relax." When he came back in and saw me standing there, he barely reacted. "I thought you handled the bills," I said quietly. "I thought you understood that I'm in a temporary cash flow situation." "That's not an answer." He rubbed his temples. "Do you know how much pressure I'm under? Investors are backing out. The market's unstable. I don't need this from you too." That was when the manipulation became clearer. Every time I asked a reasonable question, he made me feel guilty for asking. Every time I expressed fear, he called it weakness. Every time I caught him in a lie, he reframed it as strategy. And somehow I started doubting myself. Maybe I was too naive. Maybe I didn't understand business. Maybe love required patience. But love shouldn't require blindness. One Friday night, I picked up an extra shift at the cafe. When I got home close to midnight, Daniel wasn't there. His location sharing, which he once insisted on for safety, was turned off. I texted him. No response. At 2:13 a.m., he stumbled in smelling like alcohol and something sweet and unfamiliar. "Where were you?" I asked. "Out." "With who?" "Friends." "Which friends?" He stared at me for a long moment before laughing softly. "You're starting to sound insecure." "I'm starting to sound like your wife." The word wife felt fragile in my mouth. He walked past me without answering. The next morning, I checked our bank account. It was nearly empty. Not low. Empty. My tips from the cafe were the only reason rent hadn't bounced again. When I confronted him, he didn't deny spending money. "I had to cover a short-term investment gap," he said. "With what money?" "Ours." "There is no ours if you don't tell me." He slammed his hand on the counter. "Why are you always attacking me?" I flinched. That was the first time I realized I was afraid. Not of being hit, but of how quickly his temper could shift. I started keeping small amounts of cash hidden in a book in the closet, just in case. I didn't know what "in case" meant yet, but my instincts were waking up. The loneliness was worse than the arguments. In Maple Creek, even if you were upset, you weren't invisible. Someone always checked in. Here, I could walk through crowded streets and feel like a ghost. I didn't call my parents. Pride kept me quiet. How could I tell them they were right? How could I admit I had thrown away their trust for a man who barely respected me? One evening, I overheard Daniel in the bedroom speaking in a low voice. "I just need one more month," he said. "She doesn't know anything." "I've got it handled." "She doesn't know anything." I stood in the hallway, heart racing. When he came out and saw me, his expression hardened. "You eavesdropping now?" "I live here." "You're paranoid." "No," I said quietly. "I'm paying attention." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love was bravery, the one who thought leaving home was strength. Now bravery looked different. Bravery looked like facing truth. 2 weeks later, everything collapsed at once. The landlord taped a notice to our door. "Past due. Final warning." Daniel blamed me for not picking up more shifts. "I already work full-time," I said. "You're not thinking big enough." Thinking big enough. He was drowning, and somehow it was my fault for not floating better. That was the night I hit rock bottom. We had a screaming match that echoed down the hallway. He accused me of holding him back. I accused him of destroying us. "Maybe you should just go back to your little farm town," he snapped. "Maybe you're not built for this." Something inside me went completely still. Not shattered. Still. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something life-changing. He needed me small. He needed me doubting. He needed me dependent. Because if I wasn't, I would see him clearly. And I did. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and slid down against it. For the first time since leaving home, I let myself cry without holding it in. Not because I missed him, but because I missed me. The version of me that trusted her instincts. The version that felt safe in her own home. When the tears stopped, I washed my face and stared at my reflection. You made a mistake, I whispered to myself. But you are not the mistake. The next morning, instead of going straight to work, I stopped at a community resource center I'd passed a dozen times before. I walked in shaking. "Hi," I said to the woman at the desk. "I need information about legal separation." Saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. But instead of falling, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I wasn't ready to leave yet. I didn't have enough saved. I didn't have a plan. But for the first time since I got in that SUV and left Maple Creek, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And preparation is power. That night, when Daniel came home and started another argument about money, I didn't engage. I listened. I observed. I stopped defending myself. Because I was done trying to convince someone to value me. Instead, I started building an exit. Quietly. Carefully. Intentionally. He didn't notice the change right away. But I felt it. The shift from heartbreak to strategy. Once I stopped trying to fix him, I started rebuilding myself. Quietly. I picked up extra shifts at the cafe and told Daniel they were mandatory. I stopped sharing my tip totals. Every dollar I could spare went into a separate account I opened online during a slow afternoon at work. I used my maiden name. It felt strange typing it in again. Strange, but grounding. At the Community Resource Center, a counselor named Mrs. Alvarez met with me once a week during my lunch break. She didn't judge. She didn't rush me. She asked careful questions. "Do you feel safe?" she asked the first day. "Yes," I said. And physically, that was true. But emotionally, that answer was more complicated. Daniel had mastered a different kind of harm. The kind that made you question your intelligence, your memory, your worth. You're too sensitive. You misunderstood. That never happened. You're lucky I chose you. Little by little, I stopped internalizing those sentences. Instead, I started documenting things. Dates. Comments. Financial inconsistencies. Not because I wanted revenge, but because clarity protects you. One afternoon at the cafe, my manager pulled me aside. "You ever thought about applying for shift lead?" he asked. I blinked. "Me? You're reliable. Customers like you. You don't call out." Reliable. That word meant more to me than he realized. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." The raise wasn't huge, but it mattered. It gave me momentum. It reminded me that my value wasn't determined by Daniel's mood. At home, the tension thickened. Daniel noticed I wasn't arguing anymore. "You've been distant," he said one night. "I've been tired." "That's not what I mean." I didn't answer. He studied me like he was trying to decode something. He wasn't used to losing control of the narrative. A few days later, I came home to find him unusually warm. He'd ordered takeout.
Lia Candole.
Smiled like the man I met in Maple Creek. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "Maybe we got off track." I knew this pattern now. Charm after conflict. Affection after distance. "What changed?" I asked. "I miss us." There was a time that sentence would have melted me. Now it felt strategic.
"I miss honesty," he replied.
His jaw tightened slightly. "You're still on that?" "There is no still." It never stopped. The softness vanished. You can't let things go. And you can't take responsibility. Silence stretched between us. That night, he reached for me in bed. I turned away, not out of anger, out of clarity. A week later, everything accelerated. I came home early from work because the cafe's water line burst. As I walked up the stairs to our apartment, I heard laughter inside. Female laughter. My hands went cold. I unlocked the door. Daniel was sitting on the couch. A woman sat beside him. Not Rachel. Someone else. They both froze. "Oh," he said casually. "You're home." "I live here," I replied. The woman grabbed her purse awkwardly. "I should go." "You should," I said calmly. Daniel walked her out, whispering something I couldn't hear. When he came back in, he looked annoyed. What was that? I asked. A friend. On our couch. You're overreacting again. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at my small suitcase. I wasn't ready yet, but I was close. That night, he tried to flip it on me. You've been cold for months, he said. What do you expect? I expect respect. You're impossible to please. No, I said steadily. I just stopped accepting less. That was the moment I realized something powerful. He wasn't stronger than me.
He was threatened by me.
The next morning, I called Mrs. Alvarez. I'm ready, I said. For what? To leave. She helped me map it out, where I could stay temporarily, how to protect my finances, what legal steps to take, what documentation I needed. Preparation turned fear into direction. I didn't tell Daniel. For 2 more weeks, I moved carefully. I transferred money. I secured copies of important documents. I arranged to stay with a coworker temporarily, a quiet girl named Jasmine who had once mentioned she had a spare room. You sure? She asked when I told her. Yes. You don't seem like the type to make impulsive decisions. I almost laughed. If only she knew. The final argument wasn't explosive. It was revealing. Daniel had just gotten off the phone. He looked irritated. What now? I asked. You wouldn't understand. Try me. I had an opportunity to travel next month. Big one. But I can't because of this situation. What situation? He gestured around the apartment. This mess. The stress. You.
Me.
There it was. Clear as glass. I walked into the bedroom, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and set it on the bed. What are you doing? He asked. Cleaning up the mess. He laughed at first. Then he saw my face. You're being dramatic. No, I said quietly. I'm being done. You have nowhere to go. That sentence used to scare me. Now it didn't. I'll figure it out. You think you'll survive out there alone? I already have. He tried one last tactic. You'll regret this. I zipped the suitcase shut. I regret staying as long as I did. He didn't help me carry my bags. He didn't apologize. He didn't fight for me. And that was the final confirmation I needed. I walked out of that apartment with 2 suitcases and a heart that felt bruised but steady. The air outside felt different. Not lighter, but honest. Jasmine met me at the curb in her old Honda. You okay? She asked. I looked back at the building one last time. I will be. As we drove away, I expected to feel shattered. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar. Space. For the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for the next argument. That night, in Jasmine's spare room, I lay on a twin mattress staring at the ceiling. I wasn't rescued. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't suddenly fearless. But I had chosen myself. And sometimes that's the bravest beginning there is. I picked up my phone. For the first time since leaving Maple Creek, I called home. My hands were shaking when I called home. It rang 3 times before my mom answered. Hello. I couldn't speak at first. Just hearing her voice, warm, familiar, steady, cracked something open inside me. Mom. I finally whispered. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Emily. I started crying before I could stop myself. Not dramatic sobbing. Just quiet, exhausted tears that had been waiting for months. Are you okay? She asked immediately. That question, not, why did you leave? Not what happened. Just, are you okay? Told me everything about unconditional love. I made a mistake, I said. There was a pause. Then she said something I will never forget. Come home.
No lecture. No blam.
Just come home. When my dad got on the phone, his voice was rougher, but softer than I expected. You safe? He asked. Yes. Then we'll figure out the rest. I flew back to Maple Creek 2 weeks later. Buying that plane ticket felt surreal. The last time I left home, I thought I was stepping into a bigger life. This time, I understood something deeper. Going back doesn't mean failing. Sometimes it means surviving. When I stepped into the small regional airport near home, I spotted my parents immediately. My mom ran to me first. My dad walked slower, but when he reached me, he wrapped his arms around both of us. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just held me. The drive back into town felt different than it had months before. The fields didn't look small. They looked steady, honest,
Real.
home hadn't shrunk. My illusions had. The first few weeks were humbling. People in small towns notice everything. Word traveled fast. Some neighbors pretended not to stare. Others asked too many questions disguised as concern. City life not what you expected? One woman said with a tight smile. I learned to answer calmly. I learned a lot. And that was true. I slept in my old bedroom, staring at the same ceiling I used to dream under. Only now my dreams were different. I wasn't chasing escape anymore. I was building intention. My parents didn't push me for details. They let me settle. They let me breathe. One evening, my dad and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the fields. You hurt? He asked quietly. Yes, I said honestly. You ashamed? I thought about that.
No, y en sweat.
Not anymore. He nodded slowly. Good. Shame keeps you stuck. Lessons move you forward. That sentence stayed with me. I didn't come home to hide. I came home to rebuild. I enrolled in online business courses through a state program. Not because Daniel once talked about startups, but because I wanted to understand money, contracts, independence. I started helping my mom at the school library part-time. Then I volunteered to teach a weekend workshop for high school girls about financial literacy, budgeting, bank accounts, recognizing manipulation. The first time I stood in front of that small classroom, my voice trembled. I want to tell you something, I said. Confidence isn't loud. It's consistent. And anyone who tries to make you feel small so they can feel big, that's not love. Some of the girls looked confused. Some looked like they understood more than they should at their age. I didn't share every detail of my story, but I shared enough. Word spread that I was good with organizing, planning, social media. A local boutique owner asked if I could help her expand online sales. I built her a simple website. Then another small business asked for help. Within a year, I had a modest remote consulting service helping small-town businesses build online presence. Not glamorous, not skyscrapers, but mine. Daniel tried to call once. I didn't answer. He sent a message. I miss you. I've changed. I read it, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. I replied with one sentence. I hope you become the man you pretend to be. Then I blocked the number. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It meant I no longer carried the weight of it. One fall evening, almost 2 years after I left Chicago, I stood at the edge of our property, watching the sky stretch wide and orange. The same sky I once thought was too small. I realized something powerful. I hadn't needed a bigger city. I had needed a stronger voice. Leaving home had broken something in me, but it had also revealed something. Resilience isn't loud. Strength isn't dramatic. Growth isn't glamorous. Sometimes it looks like swallowing your pride and starting over. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. Sometimes it looks like walking away without slamming the door. If I could speak to the girl I was at 18, the one sitting on the hood of a black SUV believing she was underplaced, I wouldn't tell her not to love. I would tell her this. Love is not proven by how much you're willing to lose. It's proven by how much you're allowed to remain yourself. I don't regret loving. I regret abandoning my instincts. But even that regret shaped me. Today, when I walk through Maple Creek, I don't feel trapped. I feel rooted. There's a difference. I rebuilt trust with my parents slowly. Not because they demanded it, but because I wanted to honor it. I show up. I communicate. I include them in my plans. And most importantly, I include myself. I no longer need someone to tell me I belong somewhere bigger. I decide where I belong. And wherever I stand, whether it's a small town porch or a crowded city street someday, I will never again shrink to fit someone else's insecurity. I once thought leaving was bravery. Now I know staying true to yourself is. My name is Emily Carter. I fell in love with a dream that wasn't real. I lost almost everything chasing it, but I found something stronger in the process. Myself. And this time, I'm not going anywhere without her. Please subscribe for more interesting stories.